Hello everybody, welcome to another Albums of the Month video. Today this is marking the end of May, and we're approaching almost the halfway point of the year with June, and there's definitely some interesting stuff coming out soon, and I'm looking forward to King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard, especially with Phantom Island. So I'm going to see how many good stuff we have for the second half of the year, but there's a lot of interesting things coming, and gonna see how this year goes, because honestly we definitely had some great material this year, and I'd probably say I'm preferring 2025 to 2024 already, but we've still got to hold our breath and see if the rest of the year delivers. But this is May, and we're going to be going over the albums I haven't been able to do a separate video on, but they're going to be listed here as I have reviewed them and listened to them. So let's get started. To start off, we're going to talk about a band that probably is the smallest one on this list, just to kind of put them there so more people hear of them. I might do that in future, just sometimes put the smaller artists near the start, but we have Fallfiftyfeet, a metalcore band that has dropped their second album after their debut in 2021, Twisted World Perspective. This is Counterfeit Recollections. Now, this album honestly is a nice surprise, and I feel like if you're a fan of the 156 silent, sort of aggressive, just downright powerful, fun riffs that just flow into different melodies, whether they get a little bit softer with some of the vocal passages, or if they just downright go sonically harder. I like the variety we get on this record, because some of it reminds me of that hardcore punk feel, but as it sticks mainly into just kind of the metalcore that I have been preferring for the last so years. Is definitely a direction that I think it'd be nice to see more bands experiment with, and Fallfiftyfeet do a pretty good job of it. I'm going to give this one a 3.5 out of 5. Fun album all the way through, and speaking of 156 Silence, they actually feature on the track Bane of My Existence, along with an artist called Princess as well, so it's quite nice, a lot of good songs. So we've got a brand new album by a pretty small metalcore band called Wounded Touch, with a vivid depiction of collapse. So this album honestly shocked me with just how much fun it was, especially with the chaotic ideas, just how aggressive the Uncleans are on this record. They do not hold back. It's definitely a pretty aggressive metalcore album that's honestly just a lot of fun, and I think following from American Anxiety, this is quite a nice listen. And I think Traumatic Entanglement was their last album or release, but I remember American Anxiety mainly because that record had Trevor from the Black Dahlia Murder, who unfortunately passed away a year ago, I believe, or two, and it's unfortunate that, because Black Dahlia Murder is incredible, but that's how I knew of this band, and their new album just kicks ass. I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5, it's pretty good. We got the brand new album by Skunk and Anansie. I was going to do a separate video for this one, but because of how busy I've been, I just had to kind of get rid of the video, and I'll just put it as a short here. I did not really enjoy this new record. I think the biggest issues I have with Skunk and Anansie moving forward is that they're definitely pushing for this very alternative sound, losing some of the fun hard rock edge they had into their earlier material. I generally felt even some of the later stuff, as the non-album singles, brought a lot more charm over than this record did. I think the record has about one or two moments that kind of remind me of what Skunk and Anansie normally sound like an artist, but even then this stuff feels like weak material, especially in comparison to their earlier stuff. I just generally found this one to kind of be a very, very bland record, and it doesn't really push the most creative aspects of the band, even if they're trying a lot of different ideas in each area they go for. It just kind of feels limited, so I'm going to have to give it a 2 out of 5. We've got the new album by Swans, Birthing. So this album is only 7 tracks, but it comes up to almost 2 hours, and if you know about Swans, a lot of their material, a lot of their stuff is pretty much 10 to 20 minute songs, most of them being around over close to 20. It's definitely hard to get into music, and I think I'm not really there with getting into them, as no matter how much I try with this band, I just feel like a lot of the songs do the same rinse-repeat structure of dragging out some bass lines, eventually incorporating the drums, and then kind of giving you this little rush of adrenaline to go back into doing the same thing. And tracks like The Healers kind of does this twice, and it's for a 21-minute track. Yeah, it just really isn't for me. I think Swans' material and quality is still quite high. I know why this band gets a lot of praise and a lot of positivity, but as of where I am, just due to the personal bias of just struggling to get into the longer material, it's definitely not material you can really listen to if you're sat in a car, unless you're driving around the country. It's just hard to even get a Swans album feel, or even a song for that matter. It's definitely a band with good quality, as I mentioned, but yeah, with Swans I just can't really get into it. I don't know why I'm really talking about it, but I guess it's just because I wanted to mention it. So this might be one of my only reviews on Swans, unless I really dig what they go for. But just kind of where I am with it is fine. I'll give it an alright rating, I suppose. It's just a 2.5 out of 5. I don't really have anything else to say than that. Sounds fine, just very hard to really get the full experience and enjoyment out of it. We've got a brand new album by NOVELISTS with a brand new singer. So instead of the previous lead singer, we now actually have a female lead, which I think honestly brings a lot of refreshing sounds to the band. Evidently, obviously, swapping genders for a band does often do that, as it does give you a lot of variety that they'd want to bring to the table, rather than what the creativeness behind what the lead singer brought in with their own vocals. But NOVELISTS' new album CODA, I think it generally puts in some of their best sounds, and I think the most consistent work they have yet to date. Not a huge fan. I honestly found NOVELISTS material beforehand to be kind of a bit forgettable and not quite as engaging or just as creative, but I like the blend here from post-hardcore to metalcore. I feel like when they push the metalcore sound, it feels a little forced in trying to capitalize on the modern metalcore trend that a lot of bands have been pushing for, but the post-hardcore elements is generally a nice surprise to see, and gives a lot more backbone to this record. I'm not big on it as I wanted to be, and I frankly did find a lot of it to be forgettable, but I can generally see this being a growth of an album, and I still probably say it's one of my favourite NOVELISTS albums they put out, so I'll give this one a 3 out of 5. We got an album by a band whose name kind of describes what I think of this record, and I don't mean it is generally one of the worst albums I've heard in a while. I just find this to be probably one of the most barren, lackluster records on my worst albums list, and I can generally see this being on there. This is just not a very fun record. I like the aspect of it bringing this moodier approach to it, but I feel like when they're trying to create this atmosphere, it doesn't really go anywhere, and just gives us kind of the same stuff we've heard beforehand from Garbage. At least the quality is still somewhat there. They generally do want to put a lot of these ideas to good use. The sound isn't too bad, but I just feel like they don't really run with it or have enough confidence to push this whole moody aesthetic into a full approach. Rather, they just use aspects of it and just kind of try and replicate what worked beforehand. And if you like this record, then I can generally see why, because I feel like for 30 years since Garbage started, I generally can see fans enjoying this still, but yeah, I'm not really a big fan of it, and it's even worse by the fact that we have the Sunbather font and text style that they have on the album art for Death Heaven, Sunbather, and the album art just has this abysmal looking octopus on it. I don't really know what else to say, but I am not a fan of this one. I'm going to have to give it a 2 out of 5. We got the brand new album by Behemoth, The Shit of God. And I wish I was making that up, but that is actually the title for this record. So I do have my complaints with this. I feel like already by the title you can tell that this is the band trying to be edgy, and the edgy, cringy lyrics is pretty much the biggest thing that stood out to me straight away from this, but considering the instrumentation doesn't. A lot of the elements they put into this just kind of feels like The Satanist, but done again and again. with pretty much little variation, and there's also just some vocal passages I'm not a fan of. The falsetto in the final track just literally sounds like Matt Bellamy from Muse, and I just cannot unhear that. It's just really weird, but this generally is just one of the most bland albums from Behemoth in my opinion, and it's unfortunate because the production's not too bad and I feel like this could have been a lot better, but for what we got it was just cringy. It's just kind of an album I didn't really see myself going into, so I'm going to have to give this one a 2 out of 5. Pretty weak for Behemoth. We got a new one by the Kooks, Never Know. Got to be honest, it's not bad, and I wasn't saying that I was expecting it to be, but the Kooks definitely had their best material straight away in their career with a lot of hits on their debut record, such as Naive, Ooh La. There's just so much joy to have in early Kooks. They're definitely one of the bigger names in the indie scene, and it makes sense too. But yeah, this album, I think it definitely still carries nice elements over, and I think from what was their last album, which was very forgettable, this definitely feels more consistent, more of one of his albums where I don't really want to go out of my way to listen to it, but something that if I heard it in the background I would not complain, because I left this album playing when I was saying I Needs to Be Done, and I don't think I really regret that. So definitely an alright record, definitely one I think is just good, alrightly good. The new album by the Sherlocks, Everything Must Make Sense. Yeah, honestly, this is probably the most, I guess, sort of mundane, very average Sherlock's experience I think I could have personally. I honestly felt their last album, People Like Me and You, had a little bit more charm and charisma that I think worked well with the band's ideas, and frankly here it just kind of comes off as another indie rock experience and doesn't quite push some of their most experimental stuff, other than a few tracks like Bones, which this one stood out for having a longer outro, making the song over 6 minutes, which is pretty interesting, and I actually found that to be one of the huge highlights here. But I feel like everything here is just fine. It's just decent polish. Mixing's fine, mastering's fine, production is all fine. It's just literally, to sum up the album, is fine. I don't really have anything strong for it or strong against it. It's just a fine album, so it gets an alright 2.5 out of 5 for me. We've got the brand new album by the noise rock dance punk band Model Actriz with their second record, Pirouette, which this is interesting because the first album they had, Dog's Body, was more of a noise rock record where the drum was pretty much the significant instrument played with the track. You'd have this distortion, you'd have this noisy, grainy sound, but with what Model Actriz wanted to accomplish with the second record is a bit more of a dance groove where the bass is more prominent, and it just generally creates more feelings and just more just instrumentation to really create this dance punk sound, something they haven't quite dabbled with in the first record, pushing it more for this. And I must say, it sounds cleaner, it's got some nice ideas. While the first album is interesting, I think the experiment into this was giving us better results, to be honest. It's a good album. I'll give this one a 3 out of 5. I generally enjoy the first bunch of songs, and not as big on the second half. I think the second half kind of feels like the ideas for this dance sound just kind of wean off a bit, but the first few give you a very strong indication of their change, and I appreciate that. We got a new album by the grunge gaze band Bleed, a band that doubles in grunge and shoegaze, a genre mix that is generally just pretty much popping off with a lot of bands, and Bleed are no exception. It's another band within the genre, and I think here the biggest issue I have with it is, while the material, there's nothing that sounds bad, and I think on paper it sounds good, I just think the biggest drawback of this record is that a lot of the songs just sound too familiar in terms of the structuring of it. From the chorus to the verses, some of them just kind of have this similar approach to it, and one of the more enticing tracks to me is the one that features Static Dress, Enjoy Your Stay, and I don't think this one quite lived up to the hype. I just don't think Static Dress really put as much of their sound into it. It just kind of felt like a very small inclusion of theirs, but I generally think still it's a fun album, not one I really want to go out of my way to, as it doesn't quite hit the same way as something like Narrowhead Moments of Clarity, a much well crafted grunge gaze album has, but still good. I'll give it a 3 out of 5. It's enjoyable. The new album by Sports Team, Boys These Days, definitely in my opinion has more energy I prefer than what Gulp had. I feel like the structures and song signatures in this one were definitely a lot stronger. The instrumentals were just more upbeat. They stood out, quite catchy, and I think as a whole album, it doesn't really have a skip track. It's not going to be anything I'd praise widely, but for Sports Team, especially as I enjoyed Gulp, I think this is a step more into the right direction, and I'm quite enjoying this one, but I will give it a 3 out of 5. It hasn't quite clicked with me as much, and I feel like there is some moments I would either trim, because some of it just doesn't feel like it needs to be there for me, but as a whole, album's still good, and I find it interesting that Moving Together just kind of has this instrumental that feels like the Coronation Street theme, so I guess there's something interesting there that caught my eye. But yeah, 3 out of 5. Got a new album, Pink Elephant, by the Canadian indie rock band Arcade Fire. This was just beyond terrible. I feel there was no redemption with this record or any soul put into it after the heart-crushing allegations the lead singer had. I'm pretty sure it's around the weed point of the previous record, there was allegations and controversies tied to the lead singer, and I can understand the Pink Elephant concept coming out of this, considering the fact that it's a very emotional, hard-hitting thing that you could witness. Imagine like your reputation just plummeting just because of allegations, controversies. It's not a good thing, but it feels like just as soon as that's happened, any passion or soul from Arcade Fire just completely waltz out the door, and you're just left with pretty much a shell that has no redeemable qualities to it. This album was just downright one long bore of a listen. There was nothing that I would even consider thinking about going back into, and I'm probably going to give it the first one of the year, the first 1 out of 5. This was just one of the worst things I could have ever seen and heard in my life. This was just awful. Why did this need to exist? We got the new album by PUP, Who Will Look After the Dogs, and as much as I honestly like the morbid stuff direction, I'm not the biggest fan of this record, unfortunately. I don't think it's a terrible record, but the biggest problems I have for me is just how it's mixed. It just has this very weird fuzzy sound that's kind of distracting into a lot of the songs, and it's kind of a shame too, as it does mesh some of the ideas to feel a bit repetitive on the cycle. The guitars don't really pop out as much in terms of creativity, wherever it just kind of feels like a noise of static that kind of swarms over the vocals, especially since a lot of the songs push the vocals sort of to the back with a lot more of an echoey sound. I don't think it really stands out as much. I think obviously this is an intentional decision, but I think it doesn't quite work in the way that they planned it to go pretty much, but I think still there's some good stuff, and I don't think it's a terribly written record, but not really one I'd see myself going back into. I'll give this one just kind of the alright 2.5 out of 5 rating. I give. Got the brand new album by the Amazons, 21st Century Fiction. Honestly, this band that has a lot of similarities to a lot of the rock indie bands that have just been surging. Like, it's got a bit of Foals, there's some Muse to some of the vocal delivery, there's some Royal Blood. I honestly like the connection that they have putting into this more indie drive, and I think all the songs just have a lot of fun choruses, a lot of fun hooks, just a lot of fun guitars as well. It's generally got this energy, and it's just ups to the greatest degree. The interludes, I don't know why there's quite a few of them at the start, you don't really get them towards the end, but it just makes the final songs especially just flow well together, and I think it's a pretty fun album. Generally, probably could be one of the Amazons' best albums in my opinion as well. I'm going to give this one a 3.5 out of 5. Absolutely recommend this one. We got a new album by the almost entirely instrumentalist post-metal band Pelican with Flickering Resonance, their 7th record, and I'm not really feeling this one, to be honest. I think the biggest issue I have with Pelican is they used to be able to kind of drive the instrumentals to really be something kind of giving you this ethereal post-metal journey from start to finish, and I think that's what I enjoyed with their earlier works, but with this, kind of just feels like there's less of a journey and more so just kind of guitars for the sake of guitars. The riffs are nice and all, but it just feels like they're just trying to put the best riffs in front, and I just don't think it really works, or the story works quite as well as it intertwines with. I gotta talk louder because my neighbour has decided to use every day off that I have had trying to record this to make a lot of noise with his patio, and getting a bit pissed off with that. But yeah, Pelicans, unfortunately, just they aren't winning with this one, but I don't think the quality's still that really bad at all. I just think it's the kind of lack of creativity here. I feel like this is some of the more uninspired Pelican has ever been, but yeah, I think they can definitely get out of it. I just think it's kind of a one album thing, but I'm not really feeling this one, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to give it a 2 out of 5. We got the brand new album by Wolves at the Gate, Wasteland. So this album probably has some of the heaviest stuff the band's put out. They are definitely dipping their toes into this kind of modernized metalcore direction, but a lot of it still comes off as kind of the basic metalcore structure. I'm not the biggest fan of the band, but I have dabbled with them for a while now. This is a band that I have checked out every album every so often with their newer releases, and I must say I think this is an improvement over the last couple of records. I am enjoying the heavier direction, and it reminds me of what Wage War could have done with Stigma, had Stigma had the right ideas instead of going for the most generic octane core sounding sound. But Wolves at the Gate, I think while they definitely have this steamrolling with some fun ideas, and I love the energy in the first few tracks, the second half of the album is where I find it to dip, and not just that, but while the material also starts to get weaker here, we are just bloated with these more interlude type tracks. Matter of fact, I think there's 2 tracks that are just surrounded by 3 interludes, and it's just weird having songs separated with these more interlude tracks. It just kind of ruins the flow of the record, and it doesn't really make it as interesting in my opinion. So I generally will probably put this one as a 2.5 out of 5. I don't really see myself going into it as much, but I enjoy the material that's there. I just feel the second half really drags this album down for me. We got a brand new album by the sharp tone band SENNA with Stranger to Love. Honestly, this band, from the sound of this record, you can definitely tell, at least in my opinion, that this is kind of the staple standard sound that you'd hear from artists on the sharp tone record label. Post-hardcore blending with metalcore, and I'm not saying that it's a bad feat, because I feel like there is a lot of variety in sharp tone, but SENNA definitely play it more into a kind of standard sound that works in their favour. Nothing here generally feels beyond original. There are some songs that generally do feel like they have been written before, but I like the variety as well, and the electronic components to some of the songs to give them nice little sounds incorporated with the kind of post-hardcore metalcore sound actually is quite nice. And I will be honest, the writing is pretty tight with this record, and even if it does feel like kind of, they said, the bassist sound that you could expect from sharp tone, I don't think it's a bad thing if it sounds this polished. It's well polished, it's interesting, it's a good album. I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. I quite enjoy this one. So I've heard of Our Last Night from the tour announcement that Normandy, one of my favourite bands, actually supported on that tour, which was basically Our Last Night's cover album tour. And from what I've just literally been going through their discography, Our Last Night's sound has just diminished, especially going through the cover band route. And with the new brand new album Left Alone, I really think the ideas and writing is just so painfully generic. The writing here just generally has this kind of cringy aesthetic to it, especially tracks like NPC. Just the entire song just left me thinking, why? Like, it's just going into the aspect of everyone's glued to technology, everyone's just looking up to celebrities, and it's done in the most painfully crappiest way I've heard it being written in a long while, actually. And normally a lot of these songs, when they kind of do the bass generic stuff, as it's hard rocks, pop rock, that bands like Rain City Drive dabble in, they have to include breakdowns to make it have this hard rock appeal, but it does not save it. And I feel like the breakdowns are mainly utilised at either the end of the song or in just as a bridge, just so they have something for the bridge. It just feels like the songs pieced together just don't really have as much creativity or as ideas put into it, and just gives us kind of this jumbled mess of very painfully below average material. I think for Our Last Night they have just kind of been spiraling downwards, and yeah, it's disappointing, especially with how I liked Left Alone. I like the experimentation on this track, but as it just delved further into this record, it really didn't stick with me. Yeah, this is a very disappointing album. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5. Clockworked is the final album by Stray from the Path. This one just literally had a random drop with no release date or any promotion other than releasing Kubrick's Stare, the lead single. This album just came out randomly, and the band also announced alongside Clockwork this is their final album and then they'll be splitting up, which is unfortunate, but where does this hold up in their discography? For a band that's been going since the early 2000s, this generally is a pretty fun entry into their discography. Not their best work, I don't think it's their most well crafted efforts, but when it comes to hardcore punk / metalcore fusion, they definitely bring some good ideas to it, and I honestly think that they have been doing a job in elements of this genre a little better than Better Lovers have, but I'm not necessarily here to compare either of the two bands. Straight from the Path generally had a lot of good stuff, a pretty good discography, and they've kept it that way throughout the entire career of the band. But yeah, while it's not their best work, it's definitely still a fun album, and yeah, that's all I have to say. Give this one a 3.5 out of 5. Disappointed to see they broke up, but at least they ended up on a high note. That wraps up May. Honestly, it's been a pretty good month. I apologise for the lack of uploads towards the end, but hopefully June will be a bit better. There will be some points where I won't be uploading because I do want to test out my new game console, but I'll still be doing reviews on the stuff I generally want to do. So Catatonia, try and get that one out as soon as I can, because that's coming out pretty soon, and King Gizzard, and Ailstorm as well. So there's the only albums I'm looking forward to, and there's other albums as well that I do want to talk about. So that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoy. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next video.